1 ounce of gold, 31 gram, it fits in the palm of your hand. 2,000 years ago, a Roman centurion, a professional soldier commanding 80 men on the frontier of an empire, earned about 38 ounces of gold per year. That was his salary for leading men into battle, holding the line, keeping Rome alive. Today, a United States Army captain, roughly the same rank, roughly the same job, earns about 36 ounces of gold per year. 2,000 years. Different empires, different continents, different centuries, and the same job pays almost exactly the same amount of gold. How is that possible? Everything else has changed. Languages, borders, technology, governments. Currencies have been invented, inflated, destroyed, and replaced hundreds of times over, but the amount of gold a professional soldier earns has barely moved. This video is about 1 ounce of gold and what it can teach us about the real value of human labor across 2 millennia. We're going to carry that ounce through 8 eras, from Rome to today. And in each one, we'll ask the same question. How many days of work does it take to earn it? The answer will change, and the reasons it changes will tell you more about money than any economics textbook ever written. The Roman Empire under Augustus had one of the most sophisticated monetary systems in the ancient world. The gold aureus, roughly 8 grams of pure gold, sat at the top. Below it, the silver denarius. Below that, bronze. A Roman legionary, a foot soldier, earned 225 denarii per year. That comes out to roughly 2 ounces of gold, meaning 1 ounce of gold equaled about 6 months of a soldier's life on the frontier, half a year of marching, fighting, and sleeping in the dirt. A centurion earned significantly more, enough to buy land, keep a household, and retire with status. For him, 1 ounce represented roughly 10 days of service. And what could that ounce actually buy in Rome? About 350 loaves of bread, a respectable toga, a month's rent in a modest apartment in the city. Remember those numbers. That ratio, 1 ounce buys roughly 350 loaves, is going to follow us through the next 2,000 years. And it almost never breaks. But Rome didn't last. And the reason it didn't last is written in its coins. Over 2 centuries, emperors steadily reduced the silver content of the denarius from 98% pure to less than 5. They were printing money the only way they knew how, by diluting it. Prices exploded. Trust collapsed. The economy unraveled. Gold held. The people who had it survived. The people who trusted the denarius didn't. After Rome fell, Europe fractured into a patchwork of feudal kingdoms. Trade shrank. Cities emptied. The economy contracted to something almost unrecognizable. Gold didn't disappear, but it became rare. In 13th century England, an ounce of gold was worth about 0.89 pounds. A skilled stonemason earned 3 to 4 pence per day. Do the math. 1 ounce of gold cost him over 200 working days, almost an entire year of cutting stone. For that ounce, he could buy a cow, maybe 2, a year's supply of grain for his family, a small plot of land. The ounce hadn't changed, but the world around it had collapsed. Without empire, without trade routes, without scale, human labor was worth less. A day of work bought less gold. Not because gold became more precious, but because the systems that made labor productive had disappeared. Productivity collapsed, and gold exposed it. Gold reflected that truth. Over long enough horizons, it always does. But something was coming that would change the equation for the first time in 1,000 years. And it came from a direction nobody expected. Across an ocean that most Europeans didn't even know existed. Then Columbus crossed the Atlantic. And for the first time in recorded history, something happened that had never happened before. There was suddenly too much gold. Spain and Portugal spent the 16th and 17th centuries stripping the Americas of precious metals. Gold and silver flooded into Europe. Within 200 years, the continent's gold supply roughly tripled. The result was the price revolution. Prices across Europe rose 4 to 6 times over a century. A Spanish soldier promised gold in the New World came home to find that his gold bought far less than his grandfather's had. This is the only period in 2,000 years when gold lost significant purchasing power. Not because of government manipulation, not because of financial engineering, simply because there was physically more of it. Supply and demand, the most basic law in economics, applied to gold just as it applies to everything else. But here's the critical difference. It took 200 years and the conquest of 2 continents to triple the gold supply. Compare that to paper money. The US dollar supply has roughly tripled since 2008 alone in 15 years. No conquest required. Just a keyboard. In 1717, Isaac Newton was running the Royal Mint. He fixed the price of gold at £3, 17 shillings, and 10 pence per troy ounce. That price held for 200 years. 2 centuries. Through wars, revolutions, the rise and fall of empires. One of the longest stretches of price stability in recorded economic history. In the United States, gold was fixed at $19.75 per ounce. Starting in 1792, it was raised slightly to $20.67 in 1834, and it stayed there. What did an ounce buy during this era? A factory worker in 19th century England earned about £1 per week. 1 ounce of gold, about 4 weeks of labor, a month's work. And for that ounce, a month's rent in London, a quality men's suit, 300 to 400 loaves of bread. Sound familiar? It should. It's almost identical to what an ounce bought in Rome 1,800 years earlier. The toga and the suit. Different fabric, different century, same ounce. As long as currencies were anchored to gold, inflation was negligible by any modern standard. That anchor held wages, contracts, and expectations in place. Prices in England in 1914 were roughly the same as in 1717. 200 years of near-perfect stability. Nothing like it had existed before, and nothing like it has existed since. The gold standard wasn't perfect. It was rigid, sometimes painfully so, but it did one thing that no system since has managed. It kept governments honest, because you can't spend what you can't back, and you can't back what you can't dig out of the ground. The 20th century broke everything. World War I was too expensive to fight with gold-backed money. Governments suspended the gold standard and started printing. After the war, they tried to go back. It didn't work. The world had changed. In 1934, Franklin Roosevelt did something extraordinary. He made it illegal for American citizens to own gold, a federal crime, and ordered them to sell it to the government at $20.67 per ounce. Then he raised the official price to $35 overnight. Every dollar people received for their gold was worth 40% less. A wealth transfer from citizens to the state, executed with the stroke of a pen. An average American worker earned about $1,500 a year. At $35 an ounce, gold cost him roughly 8 or 9 working days, just over a week. Then came Bretton Woods in 1944. The entire world's currencies were pegged to the dollar. The dollar was pegged to gold at $35 per ounce. Gold was still the center of the global monetary system, but ordinary people were no longer allowed to touch it. This arrangement lasted 27 years, until one president decided the rules no longer applied. And that single decision, made on a Sunday evening without consulting Congress, changed the relationship between gold and human labor more than anything in the previous 2,000 years. August 15th, 1971. Richard Nixon went on television and announced that the United States would no longer exchange dollars for gold. The last link between money and anything physical was severed. What followed was the most dramatic repricing of gold in history. $35 in 1971, $850 by 1980, then down, then back up, then higher, over $2,000 during COVID, and somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 as you're watching this. The exact number doesn't matter because the direction does. But here's what the price chart doesn't tell you. In 1971, the average American worker earned about $7,500 a year. Gold was $35. 1 ounce cost less than 2 days of work. Today, the average worker earns somewhere around $60,000 to $70,000. Gold is in the low thousands. 1 ounce now costs roughly 2 to 3 weeks of labor. That's a tenfold increase in effort for the same piece of metal. Gold didn't change. Nothing about it changed. The dollar changed. Since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, the dollar has lost over 96% of its purchasing power. What cost $1 then costs more than $30 now. Gold didn't gain value. It just refused to lose it. The dollar couldn't say the same. And the bread test? The exact numbers depend on where you shop and how you weigh a loaf. But the order of magnitude hasn't changed. An ounce of gold today still buys roughly the same basket of basic staples it bought in Rome. And in 19th century England, the measuring stick didn't move. Everything else did. So let's put it all together. In Rome, an ounce of gold bought roughly 350 loaves of bread and cost a centurion about 10 days of service. In medieval England, it cost a stonemason almost a year because productivity had collapsed and labor was worth less without an empire behind it. During the Age of Discovery, gold lost value for the only time in 2,000 years because its supply physically tripled over 2 centuries. Under the gold standard, 1 ounce cost a factory worker about a month and bought the same bread, the same clothing, the same rent as it had in Rome. After Nixon severed the link, the dollar melted and gold repriced. Not because gold changed, but because the unit measuring it did. 3 conclusions from 2,000 years of data. First, gold doesn't measure wealth. It measures labor. The number of working days per ounce shifts with how society values work. But the bread, the clothing, the shelter it buys stays remarkably constant. Second, whenever an ounce starts costing more days of labor, that's a signal. It means the currency paying the wages is losing power. In 1971, an ounce cost 2 days of work. Today it costs 2 to 3 weeks. That's not gold rising, that's the dollar shrinking. Third, the only time gold lost purchasing power was when its physical supply increased massively. And that took 2 centuries and 2 conquered continents. No government has ever replicated that effect because you cannot print gold at the same ounce. 31 grams, it hasn't changed. Rome debased its silver and collapsed. Spain flooded Europe with gold and triggered inflation. England held gold steady for 200 years and built one of the most stable economies the world had seen. America tied the world to gold, then untied it, and the dollar has been falling ever since. Through all of it, 1 ounce of gold kept buying roughly the same thing: a month or 2 of decent life, a suit, a month's rent, 350 loaves of bread. Gold doesn't rise. Gold doesn't fall. Gold stands still. Everything else moves around it. And when someone tells you gold is expensive, ask them, expensive compared to what? To paper that can be printed? To digits that can be created with a keystroke? A Roman centurion earned 38 ounces a year. An American captain earns 36. 2,000 years, same job, same gold,